Breaking news in the NFL world today and Cowboys Nation, you need to lock in because this is not just another off-season rumor or social media buzz cycle. This is a foundational story about the future of the Dallas Cowboys defense and the direction this franchise is quietly preparing to take, because behind the scenes, league circles are increasingly convinced that the Cowboys have identified Pittsburgh Steelers superstar safety Minkah Fitzpatrick as their top long-term defensive target for the 2026 window. And when you hear that name connected to Dallas, it immediately signals something much bigger than just adding another Pro Bowl player. It signals an organizational acknowledgement that the Cowboys' defensive identity has slipped, fractured, and in key moments completely vanished, especially when the lights are brightest. And this potential pursuit of Minkah Fitzpatrick is about restoring fear, structure, leadership, and intelligence to a defense that has too often relied solely on raw talent and splash plays rather than control, discipline, and consistency. To understand why this matters so much, you have to zoom out and look at the Cowboys over the last several seasons. Because while the box scores and regular season metrics have often painted Dallas as an elite defensive unit, the film and the playoff outcomes tell a much harsher truth. One where miscommunication, blown coverages, and a lack of on-field command have repeatedly undermined elite pass rush performances and wasted dominant stretches from stars like Micah Parsons. And that's where Minkah Fitzpatrick enters this conversation in such a powerful way, because he is not just a safety. He is a system stabilizer, a defensive quarterback, and a player whose presence alone reshapes how offenses approach an entire game plan. Minkah's value has never been about gaudy interception totals or highlight real moments alone, although he has plenty of those, but about the things casual fans don't always see: the pre-snap alignments, the coverage disguises, the way he communicates responsibilities to corners and linebackers, the way he erases mistakes before they become touchdowns, and the way he forces quarterbacks to hesitate just long enough for pass rushers to get home. And that exact skill set is what the Cowboys have been missing since the days of true defensive generals like Darren Woodson. A comparison that may sound lofty but becomes increasingly accurate the deeper you dive into Fitzpatrick's impact. Dallas has invested heavily in edge rushers, corners, and athletic linebackers, but what they haven't had is a true back-end enforcer who sees the entire field and dictates terms. And when you look at how the Cowboys defense has struggled against elite quarterbacks in the postseason, it's not because they lack talent, it's because they lack cohesion and control. And Minkah Fitzpatrick is quite literally one of the best players in football at providing exactly that, which is why the Cowboys front office is reportedly willing to be patient and strategic rather than reactive, understanding that 2026 represents a unique convergence of cap flexibility, roster turnover, and opportunity. By that point, several veteran contracts will have either expired or been restructured. Younger players will be fully developed, and Dallas will be in a position where adding one elite, high IQ defender could elevate the entire unit from good to championship caliber. And this is also where the Steelers situation becomes part of the equation. Because while Pittsburgh has no desire to simply give away a player of Minkah's caliber, they are also a franchise that values timing, asset management, and long-term sustainability. And as Fitzpatrick approaches his late 20s, the Steelers will inevitably face tough decisions about roster balance, youth infusion, and future cap allocation, making 2026 a realistic inflection point rather than a fantasy scenario. From Dallas's perspective, this is not about desperation. It's about foresight, understanding that Micah Parsons' prime years must be maximized, not wasted, and that asking one player to be both the emotional leader and the schematic focal point of a defense is unsustainable over the long haul, especially in January football, where opponents exploit every weakness and every mental lapse, and that's where the idea of pairing Parsons' chaos with Fitzpatrick's control becomes so tantalizing because it creates a defense that can both attack and contain, disrupt and stabilize, gamble and recover. And when you imagine Minkah operating on the back end with the freedom to roam, erase, and punish, it unlocks a level of aggressiveness for Dallas's corners that they simply have not been able to maintain consistently, allowing players like Trevon Diggs and Darren Bland to jump routes with confidence rather than hesitation, knowing there is a true safety net behind them. This potential move is also about restoring a cultural standard because Minkah Fitzpatrick is widely respected across the league, not just for his play, but for his professionalism, preparation, and accountability, traits that quietly shape locker rooms and defensive meeting rooms in ways statistics never capture. And for a Cowboys team that has often been criticized for lacking edge and focus when adversity hits. Adding a player who demands precision and effort on every snap could be transformational. Scheme-wise, Fitzpatrick is a dream fit regardless of who is calling the defense in 2026 because his versatility transcends system. Whether it's single high, two high, quarters, man, zone, nickel, or dime, Minkah plays them all at a high level without coming off the field, eliminating the need for situational substitutions that offenses love to exploit. And that alone makes him one of the most valuable defenders in football because he allows defensive coordinators to disguise intentions without sacrificing personnel integrity, something Dallas has struggled with when injuries or mismatches force adjustments. Of course, none of this comes cheap, and Cowboys fans need to be realistic about that because acquiring a player of Fitzpatrick's caliber would almost certainly require premium draft capital or a significant player plus pick package, but that cost must be weighed against the reality that elite defensive playmakers rarely hit the open market. And when they do, they reshape franchises, and Dallas has reached a point where incremental improvements are no longer enough, where another rotational piece or mid-tier starter will not change playoff outcomes, and where boldness may be required to finally bridge the gap between regular season success and postseason legitimacy. This is why the Minkah Fitzpatrick conversation matters so much more than just his name on a jersey, because it represents a philosophical shift toward valuing defensive intelligence and leadership at the same level as athleticism and star power. And it signals that the Cowboys understand what championship defenses actually look like in today's NFL, where offenses are too advanced and quarterbacks too skilled to be beaten by pressure alone, and where the margin between winning and losing often comes down to one misread, one blown assignment, or one safety arriving a split second too late. If Dallas is able to execute this plan, whether through a trade or strategic acquisition in 2026, the ripple effects would be immediate and profound, transforming how opponents prepare, how Dallas closes games, and how this team is perceived league-wide, because suddenly the Cowboys would not just be a flashy, talent-rich roster, but a disciplined, controlled, and intimidating defense capable of traveling anywhere and winning in any environment. And that is ultimately what this story is about. Yeah, not speculation, not hype, but a franchise quietly positioning itself to reclaim a defensive identity that once defined it, understanding that championships are built not just on stars, but on structure, leadership, and fear, and Minkah Fitzpatrick embodies all three, making this one of the most fascinating long-term storylines to watch as the Cowboys chart their path forward toward 2026 and beyond.